I don't understand what I'm doing. So I don't know what I'm doing. It's very stressful. I put it on private, and I think that's gonna help me, which is amazing that's it's hard. It's hard for me to go public to talk about vulnerable things where things are not germinated yet. Um, and I'm just going to take pauses, like long pauses while I formulate. So people would call this an image issue, perfectionism, people pleasing. But I want to take long pauses to formulate. That's the that's the way. So look, I'm going to beg, please let me take as much time as I need. Who am I talking to? I'm going to take as much time as I need. This, well, it's for others. It's for whatever. It's for myself. It's for others. It's for others and myself. It's for myself. And I want to, it's almost like I'm acclimatizing myself to this. This is journaling. But it's easier than journaling because journaling, my hand hurts to write. And I don't necessarily want to type. Word documents. I want to be able to riff and be. I have all this brilliance that just comes up and then it's lost because it's too hard to write it down. And when I feel pain, it's a glossing over dissociative thing that happens, right? And then I need time to process it. And so I'm already like, that's already happening. So when I pause, sometimes it's to formulate or regroup, and it's trying to process what's coming up and what I'm doing. What's the point? Okay. And there's so much sadness. So much sadness. I have so much to say and comment. And then when I try this, it's like, it's hard to explain. I go moot. I just, it's hard just to say words, right? So in the privacy, when I'm alone and I'm watching these YouTube channels, I'm constantly like blah blah blah, and I'm aggressive and opinionated and righteous and vociferous. Not what's the word? Vociferous? I'm whatever. Verbose. I'm able to talk freely. And then it's so interesting. Because I love I love talking. I love having people watch me talk. At least I have in the past. Maybe my personality's been altered. I've always loved to be the center of attention. Listen to me. I have things to say. Like, I wouldn't be able to do this if somebody just popped into the live stream and started chatting. I can't do both. I can't do both. I guess I'm easily influenceable. Like, somebody else can ruin me with their words. And I'm so ashamed of that. And it bothers me. Like, why am I so fragile? Why can't I just speak and somebody else can say something and it doesn't affect me? Why do perfect strangers, I mean, that's not really, who cares if they're, but someone comes in and says something, why would that get me off track of me expressing myself? It means that I am almost non-existent, that my sense of self is almost non-existent. Anyway, this is meant for me. This isn't about pleasing other people or having people like me. This is the problem. This has been my problem with is other people liking me and agreeing with me and thinking what I have to say is important or valid or affirming me. It's like I'm performing for an audience and I'm identifying with what the audience is perceiving me as. And I'm living there so that I'm not living here. So I get the why can't I speak my truth? Why am I so apprehensive? Like I'm a people person. I'm a people person. So I'm perplexed. But is that what I is like being vulnerable. It's terrifying. They're gonna, I guess, bite my head off, jump down my throat, judge me harshly, tell me I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't going to work. If I can't stop myself from thinking about what other people are going to think of this, maybe this isn't going to work. Because the point of this is I don't know, to be heard. Anyway, I do want to get into it. I don't want to be worried about perfectionism, being perfect. And I want to congratulate myself on my courage. To just, yeah, I got to start. I got to start somewhere. I don't understand why I'm so blocked with this. The thing that I desire most. I've I've had a dream to do this for decades now, and I've been afraid to do it. Yeah, there's something weird inside me. It didn't used to be this hard to speak publicly. So that could be my sleep deprivation, or it could be that whenever I've spoken publicly, it's been a false or a surface personality. And my intention now is to be vulnerable and authentic and to address the deep issues of my life that have plagued me, that have held me back, that are operating, that block me. It's like I don't even recognize myself. I haven't even got to the point of this. My intention, which that's fine. That's fine. I'm giving myself time here. Okay? I'm giving myself time. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to do it. That's the new David. I just have to do it and not worry about being perfect. There's so much, it's like dead inside me. I'm not fully alive. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be saying these things. I shouldn't put them into words. So the intention of this, maybe it'll just, whatever. I'll just fail. This will just be a failure. I'll just fail. The intention of this was, I have an idea in my head that I want to do commentary of Daniel Mackler's videos and then share what comes up for me, where I disagree with him, where he's showing me something new. And part of it is to inculcate within me the things that he's showing that are new. And on the one hand, showing gratitude, but on the other hand, showing judgmentalism, harsh critique of him because he's not good enough. He's not righteous enough. Like he doesn't. My phone is going off. You know, when you have a circle of friends that you know for decades, you can sit around a fireplace and shoot the shit, right? And be like, yeah, I call bullshit. That's wrong. Whatever. You're right. Why would you do that? Blah blah blah. That's sort of what I want to be like with Daniel Mackler and going over his videos, but and I'm almost ready to give up here. I'm just going to be vulnerable. I don't know how to do this. Okay? I just don't know how to do this. It bothers me that I don't know how to do this. It's too hard. There's too much trauma for me to learn how to do this. Like, I don't know. I just have to go back and it's so like I don't know how to do this.
Ask that I make a video on the subject of loneliness. And the hard thing for me, I think, about making this video right now is that I'm not feeling particularly lonely. So I'm not strongly in touch with a feeling of loneliness in my own personal life, but I have been. So I think it will help for me to talk about loneliness by also going into some of those feelings from when I was lonely, much more lonely, or talking about that time of loneliness in my life, what I went through, how I ended up there, and how I got out of it also. But let me just start by saying, when I was a therapist for 10 years in New York City. A lot of the clients that I worked with were people who told me explicitly that they felt lonely. They had a lot of loneliness a lot of the time. And what I saw over time is a lot of the things they were going through in their life, the things that ended up getting them diagnosed with different psychiatric disorders were really resulting from their loneliness. And not just their loneliness, but I think the big thing that the loneliness contributed to their problems was it made it more difficult for them to figure out how to get out of their problems. I think a lot of people have a lot of problems, but I think when people are very lonely, it makes life more hopeless. It makes things much more difficult to get a sense of hopefulness out of. Loneliness.
So here he is making a connection between loneliness and hopelessness, which this is like the gratitude I have for his journey. I mean, this guy, for all his flaws and all the things I think he's gotten wrong on, he's fundamentally wrong on, he has done the work to be able to get, he's gone to the catacombs, and so he's discovered these truths that loneliness contributes to hopelessness. And I've never made that connection. And so one of the things I want to do, I guess, is ask myself as I'm watching these videos, is this true for me? And so for this point, I'm just going to assume it's true. It feels true. Loneliness contributes to hopelessness. What does that mean? What does that mean? Right? I mean, the consequences of that connection. You could go real deep with that. It's interesting because they seem different. Loneliness seems distinct from hopelessness as I try those on. How did he make that connection? Or is a correlation cause it? Like, is he saying that the lonely people are hopeless and they might not, be connected, but they correlate? Or it sounds like he's saying loneliness, for lack of, causes hopelessness or contributes to feelings of hopelessness.
It takes away that sense of purpose and meaning. And
takes away sense of purpose. And so now he's bringing in purpose and meaning and hopelessness, all contingent on loneliness. It's like we're a minute 46 into his video and he's just blowing shit out of the water. Purpose, meaning, hopelessness. What does this have to do with loneliness? What does this have to do with loneliness? And I just, this is like, he's potent. I'm watching these and they're just like diamond explosions of profuse profundity. And they just I'm constantly having my paradigm blown out. And so something like this, I don't have an answer. It's almost like I could spend 10 years figuring out this connection. I mean, I don't want to be overly dramatic. So I guess a part of the problem with sharing these is that the things being shared are so massive that I can't do anything with it. Like, what am I going to do with that? When I'm going to sit here and process it? It's like he's taken 20 years to get there. And I'm just like sitting down. Like, it's sort of like you just opened up a can of worms. He's constantly opening up cans of worms. And I'm using cans of worms not in a pejorative sense. Like, I'm not going to explain myself. This is not educational. I don't want to fucking educate people anymore. You either understand it or you don't. I mean, maybe I'll explain, but I'm not educating anymore. It's like a can of worms thing. I mean, Pandora's box, right? What was left? Hope. So the box is open, but hopelessness comes out. Or is, everything comes out. But I love it. I love it. I love it. I love listening to his videos. I am drawn. I am drawn to find another gem. And I'm drawn. I've known about Daniel Mackler for maybe over 10 years. And I stopped years ago. I just stopped. I don't want to tell you right now why I stopped listening to him. But the gist of it was, it wasn't enough. I was concerned about outer world issues. And he didn't seem to even have any wisdom when it came to outer world. He was inward focused. And I felt that the inward focused lacked a wisdom. And therefore, I sort of thought, this guy isn't good enough for me to, But it was, so there's that part that there's too many problems with his worldview. But it's also that what he was asking was too painful. And I didn't want to. I wasn't ready. It never worked anyway. Whenever I try to feel my trauma, it never worked. And so I sort of gave up. I don't have anybody that I trust to share my trauma with, and that they'll know what to do with it, or they'll know what I'm talking about, or that there's a way to do anything with it at all. So I say that just to say, for whatever, is that I've known about Daniel Mackler for years. I stopped following him for quite a while. And life circumstances are bringing me back to something where basics, like reality, and living in fantasy land so much, like something practical. So I'm being forced into the practicality. It's so fascinating to hear, into the practicality of what Daniel Mackler brings to the table, which most people don't like. It's so weird because you look at this and it could be perceived as theoretical, but I'm being drawn because of its practicality. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand it. And I'm not going to explain that now, but just accept. I'm being drawn inexorably, attracted like a magnet, because of the practical need for me to figure this shit out to do practical things. And he has done the work and he's sharing. And I, in a way, want to become like Daniel Mackler. And I know I'm feeling the danger where you replicate your idol or you replicate your guru and you put them on a pedestal. But whatever. I'm enamored. I'm going to be enamored, and I'm also being hypercritical because I think he gets a lot wrong, and I don't want to hide that part. So if I'm not feeling grateful, I want to be free to not worry about hurting his feelings. I don't have I'm grateful, but I also think he's full of shit. And they're both true. Okay. And again, it's like I reserve the right to be hyper judgmental. To call bullshit, to be like, that's wrong. So it's more about where I am. I just want to be real. If I'm feeling gratitude for Daniel, I'll share gratitude. If I'm feeling hatred for Daniel, I'll share my hatred of him. So I'm not sure if I'm ready to move on, but I mean, like, what do I do with all that? So that's like, these are moments to process. And so many videos is like, I've been listening for a while and I just want to pause and be like, if I'm doing this, which I'm finally doing, just pause. And I just I go into a meditation, What does this mean? Loneliness, connected to hopelessness, to purpose, to meaning. It's like, good Lord. Good Lord. My understanding of purpose and meaning was, I don't know. I know, though, that I crave to have a meaning for my life. I know this much to be true. So maybe I'll just let it go because it's too much for me to deal with. Carry on.
What do I mean by loneliness? When I think of loneliness, especially from my own history of having been a lonely person for many years of my life, loneliness was that fundamental feeling of being alone, of really feeling that I had no.
One of the things I find so fascinating is he's constantly surprising me. And I don't get surprised anymore. And so when I go, he makes connections and they're new and I'm being surprised. It's like when you go through his catalog and you look at the titles, he's going to bring it back to childhood shit, obviously. But it's hard to see where he's going to go just from the title. And I love that I don't know where he's going to go, that I can't predict where. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Allies. I had nobody who really knew me really well. Nobody who really cared about me very much. Nobody who maybe even I felt that I loved that much and felt that connected with. I didn't feel like there was anybody out there who was really like me, and no one out there who was like me who also knew that I even existed. I felt my existence was so solitary. And loneliness really was a feeling for me fundamentally. It was just a feeling of heaviness, of emptiness, of sadness, or maybe not even emptiness, of being so full, actually, of all these feelings, but having nowhere to put them. All this sadness, all this hope, all this built up desire to do something, and yet
now I'm having, I don't know what they're called, a meta moment where I just was talking about how I have all these thoughts and feelings and nowhere to put them and nobody who understands. I just spent perhaps a part of this stream talking about what he's talking about now, and I am lonely. So I am this. I have all this juice of life bubbling up, and nobody, good Lord, nobody that I trust that gets me enough to be vulnerable enough. And so here's where I get gratitude. His journey, he's got it, he's putting this into fucking words and making it public. And that's a blessing to me. It's a blessing to me.
There was nowhere for it to go, nowhere for it to come out. I tried to find different ways to express it, sometimes through art, through music, even through maybe having a pet. I remember I used to connect with our family dog because I felt sometimes he was the one who got me the best, or my cat. My cat would come and snuggle with me at night as I'd be lying in bed, and I would cry and just wish that he was a person, wish he was a friend who cared about me. And my cat did care about me, but then my cat would go off and sneak outside and catch rats and birds and things like that and forget about me, and I'd be left all alone and realizing, God, my best friend is a cat, my best friend is a dog. There's nobody out there who really knows me. And it was a feeling often that like I had a life of such meaning, but it was so private and so personal and so disconnected.
This is amazing, right? So this is like where I feel I have such an impassioned creative bubble spark bubbling up within me. So much to bring, so much to offer, so many thoughts on so many topics, ways of being, bringing joy, and no one and nowhere to receive it. No safety, no people to reciprocate or understand or comprehend or validate or add to or challenge that I respected. Like if they said this, someone that I trusted. All this brilliance that nobody sees, that I'm hiding.
Connected from anyone else, that it was almost like, does it really mean anything in the greater picture? It was like, why am I doing any of this? It's not that I was exactly suicidal.
So here's the thing. Meaning is like validation from others. This is like, and this is what I've struggled with. It could be taken that he's connecting. You get a sense of meaning if you get validation from others. Like there's because somebody else understands it or gets what you're saying, and you get feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback, and that's where meaning is. And I guess I've had a philosophy supposition that in order for your meaning to be truly resilient, it can't be dependent on validation from others. But that could be like a hypothetical purity issue that doesn't exist in reality, that meaning has to almost intrinsically depend to an extent on feedback from other human beings. And that seems like that's what he's saying. And it's sort of like the idea of the word encourage is other people can give you courage. It sounds, crazy, right? But it's like you gain courage from other people. I mean, right? That's magic.
Suicidal, but it was just a feeling of meaninglessness somehow. Like, wait a second, there's got to be some more meaning, but I'm just not feeling it. Also, a feeling of despondency, like I didn't know what to do to better connect with people. I was trying everything at my disposal.
I mean, it's just beautiful. I almost do like you could just be like, sort of take the words out and be like, now I feel like I could just float on a boat and be, I'm in the middle of a lake. I'm feeling like the meaninglessness of because I'm so alone and nobody cares. Despondency, feeling despondent. There's nothing, yeah, it's like you're staring into the void and nothing's staring out at you that is alive. You're just being like, the mirror is black.
To connect with people, and it wasn't working. And I was just left with all this built up energy inside myself, all this sadness, all this sense of stuckness. And yet I couldn't do anything about it. And no one heard it. Nobody really saw it. And or even if they did, they didn't know how to do anything about it. And it was incredibly frustrating. I did.
It's like you're hermetically sealed. Nothing's getting in, nothing's getting out, and you're going to die if somebody doesn't reach out and touch you soon.
Eventually, at various points, start coming out of it. Sometimes just being very involved with activities with other people, even if they didn't know what my inner world was about, was very helpful because I was distracted. I was doing stuff. I was active. I was physically active. I was around other people. That helped. But then when I'd be alone, it would all come back. For me, ultimately, the cure for my loneliness personally was two things. And
I've had that experience where you sort of they get out of yourself, right? And you're into the world, you're interacting with others. But then when that's it, it all comes back. And then it's like a kick. It's like a thud to the gut because it's like nothing's been resolved. I've just distracted myself with social interactions.
The first one was really working very hard to build a relationship with myself on the inside. That was through, I guess, primarily through journaling, through.
So he hammers home almost every video, he hammers home. And I need it repeated. So I'm grateful that he repeats himself because I need him to repeat it. So the solution, right? You're like, we're looking for solutions. How do we deal with the Kobayashi, whatever, the Star Trek impossible problem? We don't cheat and change the problem and change the computer code. We can't do that. How do we deal with this impossible problem of loneliness? And so he's he's like drill like a ancient Chinese torture, but in a good way, the drop on your forehead over and over. What's the, like, when I watch, it's like, what's the solution, right? So many times there's a problem, identifying the problem accurately. That can take a whole lifetime to identify the problem accurately. And by the time you're 70, it's too late to figure out a solution. And so what's the solution? Like, what's the solution? And it's like, how? And so I'm listening to him, like, where's he going to go? And he goes here. It's fascinating because he's talking about loneliness. And then his first step is to develop a relationship with himself, which, like, he's still lonely. There's still nobody else, right? But the reason why it offers hope is because it's something that you can do. Like, so much of the problem is there's nothing I can do about it. because we're dependent on other people to play their faithful role as fellow travelers on the planet. And if nobody's a fellow traveler on the planet, it's like, what can you do? Or if you're too broken to reach out, what can you do, right? So it's like a dance between the individual and the group. But so I like how he's coming to develop a relationship with your, like, what is the solution?
Really getting to know myself and writing down my relationship with myself, just talking about me with me, it was like, that really did help, but it's.
So to reiterate, because again, I need the reiteration. Journaling to get to know myself, to develop a relationship with myself. And so here's another moment where you just take a pause. Just take a fucking pause for 10 years. I didn't think this would work. I've tried journaling before, and what I didn't comprehend, and this is very important for me, because he's constantly talking, and whenever anybody said journaling, it's like, that doesn't work because you're alone. You're talking to nobody. It doesn't matter. It's like you're like banging your head against a wall. And I would just get rageful about journaling because it's just like I'm confronted with like the stupidity and the futileness of journal. Like, what the fuck? So when it, like a talk therapist like journal, like, why what good is it ever going to do? Journaling, like cathartic, it doesn't do anything. It's not therapeutic, it's not cathartic, it's just dumb. But here's somebody who I trust that's saying journaling, right? So much of it is the messenger, not the message. Like, because I trust him. He's saying journaling. So I'm like, well, what was I doing wrong with my journaling then? I have 3 bins full of journals that I've carried around with me. What have they done for me? Nothing. Pointless. So why does he think journaling is of any value? And what I've come to is that, and this is, again, I'm very vulnerable here. When I was journaling, I was journaling with the conception of a hypothetical God figure hearing my words, and then some, like the book of life, like there's going to be like a God or an angel was going to hear my with my journaling, my barf and my puke and my pain and my whatever, and that God would, this hypothetical other would counter with something. I know it's like a fancy whatever. Like, I'm going to journal, and then God will hear my cry and converse with me, have a conversation, and tell me, this is where you're right, this is where you're wrong, this is what you got to do. I hear you. Ain't that the truth? You go, not here. You suck. Whatever. And there was nothing. Like, it's the fucking void, right? You're journaling to a fucking void. You just have to, fuck you, because there's nothing. It's silence. It's radio silence. And so what I'm hearing was that my expectation, for lack of a better word, I'm not going to explain it. I don't need to educate. I'm not going to explain it. I was journaling in the hypothetical idea that I was communicating with a hypothetical other. And that other one day would show me what to do or hear me. The hypothetical other would hear me, would respond. But what he's doing with the journaling is, again, is internal, to develop a relationship with himself. Whereas when I was journaling for 30 years, it was to develop a relationship with an outside entity being God. And so the purpose, the paradigm of my journaling was that I was going to share my thoughts with a hypothetical God figure who is going to reward my faithfulness and be like, yes, I'm reading your journals. Whereas he's saying, no, the purpose of journaling is to discover out who you are. To develop a relationship with yourself. So again, I need to sit with that because it still seems like a closed system. So you've got the closed system of journaling for a hypothetical God, and you've got the closed system of journaling to develop a relationship with yourself. You're still lonely. You're still fucking lonely. One, you're waiting for God to come down from on high. And this one, you're still you're not connecting with anybody else still. But it seems like this is sort of a short-sighted way, because it's like I think he said a two-step process.
It certainly wasn't enough, but it was a big part of it. And I think
okay, so it wasn't enough, but it's a big part of it.
By developing that relationship with me, it eased some of my desperation, because when I was more desperate to connect with people, I think people sensed that desperation and they were often kind of turned off by it. They were like, ooh, this person needs too much. They want too much and they want it too quickly. And it was like I was somehow someone who they wanted to keep a little distance from. They like to be attracted to people who are happy and gave something and weren't so deep and so heavy a lot. So what I felt is the more that I connected with myself and was able to the degree I was able meet my own needs on the inside, the less I was desperate for others to do it for me. Then the second part was when
So I need to repeat that. The more I'm able to meet my own needs on the inside, the less desperate I am for other people to meet those needs. I mean, that's fucking brilliant, right? I've already forgotten it. It's sliding away because it's profound. The more I meet my own needs on the inside, the less I need other people to meet those needs. Like it's just, it blows me inside. It's a different way of life. I mean, is he giving me permission to develop a relationship with myself? Is that what's happening? Is Daniel Mackler giving me permission to develop a relationship with myself? Is he declaring that I have a self to develop a relationship with that I didn't really know Or, yeah, I mean, this really gets into my question of narcissism, which I don't want to do this video, but it's a big issue, the question of narcissism.
And I did start to find people who were more in line with me, who shared more common values with me. I started making friends. And it wasn't the most perfect friends at first, but when I started.
So this is interesting. He just like, I started. He doesn't explain how. He just like, I did it, right? And so a lot of times you're watching, it's like, oh, I just did it, right? So he started making friends. We don't know how he did it, but what I like is that they weren't. It's almost like you have a trainer friend. You got to start somewhere. So you're basically, because you're so filled with neediness, you aren't able to attract good friends. You it's a cold way of looking at it, but it's like, because you're so crippled within, you're like, you start with trainer friends that aren't that good, but they're better than nothing type thing. So it's like you use them like a step ladder, which is horrible, but it almost sounds like there's a practicality where you just get anyone, and and just accept that they're not going to be the best friends. But you start somewhere. It's like when people talk about upgrading their boyfriend or girlfriend.
Finding people more and more who shared more values in common with me, I felt I was able to express more of myself, more of my inner relationship that I already had with me, and they were enhancing of that. And then I really started to have real personal and interpersonal connections with other people.
So it almost seems like the word that is enhancing. So he's sharing himself, and the people who he's trying to make of his friends are enhancing his authentic sharing of self. And that to find people that enhance your authentic sharing of self is where magic happens, maybe.
And what I was able to do, the less desperate I was by doing all this inner work with myself, healing my traumas, getting to know myself better, working through a lot.
The less desperate, right? It's like a catch-22. You're desperate, you need someone, but because you don't have anyone, you're going to be desperate. Like, how do you, right? It's like there's no momentum to go anywhere. So this whole, like, the critical, like, journaling to understand yourself, it almost seems anti-intuitive because you're still alone. But working on you're less desperate, right? This is very practical. This isn't like, a lot of times he seems like he's altruistic, idealistic, but this is more like a practicality. It's like, if you're less desperate, people will want to be your friends more. It's sort of, it's a practical.
A lot of my grief process in my private, intense relationship with me, the more I did that, the less needy I was, and the more I was able to give to other people. And what I found is that pretty much everybody, to some degree, is lonely. And often people sometimes who.
So he made another connection. See, this is what the only way you make these connections, if you do the work. There's no shortcut. There's no drug, I don't think. The less needy, the more able he is to help others, because he has more energy. His energy, like my energy, is being spent spinning my wheels. So there's no energy to be helpful to others.
Who don't seem the most lonely out in the world, they have their own private loneliness. And if they can find someone who really hears them, who mirrors them, who mirrors back to them their deeper sides, their deeper relationship with themselves that they may not share with anyone, they feel really welcoming. So what I found is the healthier I got and the more I connected with people who had more.
I love that. It's so interesting. When I was a kid, this mirror thing was so weird. I didn't know what people talked about mirror, and I thought everyone who talked about mirrors was broken. It was like a weird. There was a darkness. People talked about mirrors, but I think I was. I don't know. I could be wrong. I was mirror on a sort of literal level, and the mirror could. The mirror is like he's talking about finding people on the same in the same trajectory, and then it's like iron sharpens iron. We lean on each other and grow together type thing.
More values in common with me, the more they wanted me in their life. So the more I gave them, the more they turned around and gave me back. It was like really good karma. And so what happened actually,
A while back, maybe let's say 12 years, for a little section of my life, I adopted the giving energy out to others, right? And I did that. And then people started responding well, and they wanted to be around me more. And people I'd known, oh, you're so much more positive. And I was shriveling up and dying inside. It became untenable to be so giving to others because there was nothing on the other side. I was expending energy to give to others, and what was my depleted insides were getting even more depleted. And I thought this idea of quote unquote being a blessing to others to gain friendship was killing me inside. I was shriveling up of starvation, and it was horrible, and it was pathetic, and it started getting fake, and and I gave up. For that little section of life, people liked me a lot more and treated me better than they had before or since, but at the cost of me dying inside.
is a lot of their fundamental loneliness that they had was quelled by being in a relationship with me, a friendship primarily. And my primary loneliness was quelled by being in a relationship with them.
Friendship. And I'll just lightly say friendship versus therapist. They're different. Friendship.
So actually, that friendship was very mutually beneficial on that level of equality for working out and healing my loneliness and theirs simultaneously. I've seen that again and again. Now, is my loneliness cured? Do I never experience it? Not at all. Because actually, I travel a lot. I live abroad a lot. I go to places where I don't know anyone. And often I get lonely, especially after a few days of being alone, or sometimes something difficult happens and I have nobody to share it with, and then it can really hit me. I just feel so alone. Now, it does help that we live in
something difficult happens to me, and I have no one to share it with, and I feel so alone. Well, that explains my life. Trauma, no one to share it with, so alone. Another point is he's using loneliness in its sort of technical, where lonely is like you don't have people. But there's the idea of loneliness where you're lonely in a crowd. It sounds like he's done enough healing that he's not even going to use that version of loneliness. He's talking loneliness in as much as he doesn't have anyone to talk to. He's not talking about a feeling of loneliness. He's talking about like objective reality of loneliness.
in a modern era where sometimes I can just get on the internet and connect with people that I care about in faraway lands, but sometimes that's not even possible. and I can have that primary loneliness again. And I have to work hard to first have my relationship with myself. I always bring a journal to write in, and that can help, but also trying to find people, anybody who's best able to be helpful to me. And so I work really hard to foster my connections with other people. And one way is by being very giving, being very caring, being very open, being generous with myself.
That's interesting. Being very giving, being very generous, being very, giving of to others. It's sort of a I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. It's very calculating. I don't know. It seems a little backward. Like I've shared, but he's not saying this is the whole of it. He's talking about relationship with self, and this is just another tool. This isn't like I don't think he's saying this is a main tool.
Giving a lot of myself. And what I find is, again, part of having good karma and building good karma is by being very generous. And I find often people are open or more open to giving back. And part of it, again, is using discretion. If I have 20 people.
Again, he's talking about karma, which I believe in to an extent. I think my belief in karma is different than his, and I think his is different than the majority. So he's got an idea of, I got an idea of karma. He's got an idea of karma. I think both our ideas of karma are not in the majority. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know enough.
That I could potentially choose from to do my investing in interpersonally, to try to choose the best ones, the most open ones, the most caring ones, the most giving ones. And that for me really does help quell my loneliness. But to take it a step back, what about when I was a child and I was so lonely in my family of origin, and I didn't have the skill set that I have now, that I've developed over 25, almost 30 years of being an adult? When I was a kid who felt hopeless and devoid of the skills interpersonally of knowing how to connect with people, more a victim of trauma and someone who expressed a lot of the traumatic kind of behaviors that I had been taught by people who were my primary role models for relationships. I wasn't the best person to be a friend to others. I wasn't the most giving and caring and loving person. I was confused a lot of times. And I could push people away who I wanted to really care about me. The people who could have best quelled my loneliness were sometimes people who I demanded too much from or was angry at that they weren't spontaneously behaving like the parents that I didn't have. So I pushed them away. So what were my choices as a child? A lot of times they were really limited. A lot of times what I did is I just engaged in solitary activities, had a lot of personal creative pursuits that made me happy, did a lot of collecting fossils and creating art and playing music and different things that I like to do. But it was a lonely life and it was a sad life. But I remember all through my childhood always thinking, this is not going to last forever. Someday, I'm going to be happy. Someday I'm going to have real friends. Actually, as a child, I thought someday I'm going to find the perfect woman I'm going to marry and I'm going to be happy forever. That has not been my destiny, but that's okay because I actually have made wonderful friends. But as a child, that was my hope. That was the way that it manifested for me in my fantasy, that I was going to have that perfect person out there who was going.
I guess I also say about hope. Holding on to a hope, it's like you're holding on to by a thin strand. Like everything is destroyed, and all you have left in your whole entire life is hope. And then I came to the conclusion that hope is a cruel lie. You can't even hold on to hope. So when I hear him saying hope, I mean, I had hope, but it was a desperate hope that I knew I couldn't, that wasn't necessarily true. It was like wishful thinking so that I wouldn't, whatever. Wishful thinking. When in the back of my mind, this is, just horror. So, anyway, he's clinging to hope as a kid, but I'm pretty sure I had it worse than this guy. Just put it that way.
To be the person who I was going to connect with, who was going to meet my loneliness needs. But that's me. What about other people who I've seen? Because as a therapist, again and again, I saw people who were really profoundly lonely, and they were older than I am now. I saw people in their 50s and their 60s many people who came to therapy and told me, I see you once a week, Wednesday at 2 o'clock every Wednesday afternoon. And actually, I haven't had a conversation of more than 3 words with anyone since last Wednesday at 2 o'clock. You are the only person that I actually talk to. So you're the primary person, Daniel, who is helping me meet my loneliness. And I'm so lonely during the week. I spend 45 minutes with you and I think, my God, there's 168 hours in a week. And this person talks to me for 45 minutes. That's not enough. So they would say, well, what can I do? And I'd say, oh, there's so many things you can do. I would even say have to do if you ever want to hopefully get out of that loneliness. I would always.
It seems like it's so obvious to him that 45 minutes a week isn't enough. Like he's stating it like a fact. Like there's a barometer of loneliness that is healthily, like a sort of health level. 45 minutes isn't enough, like a fact. So that's interesting. He seems to identify that 45 minutes isn't enough as a incontrovertible fact.
Recommend self-therapy or going to activity groups or trying to find people to make friends with. But a lot of times people didn't have certain motivations, or they just felt it didn't work for them, or they just felt they constantly were rejected. Sometimes for certain people, being in a relationship with a therapist who they paid or who their insurance paid was the best they can find. It was like sort of cliche, but sometimes people could say, well, it was like a built-in friend, someone who isn't going to reject you because they're being paid to be in this relationship. What they're getting out of the relationship is not what you are emotionally giving them. It's from the.
I just want to say, someone who isn't going to reject you. Right? Wouldn't that be great to have friends that aren't going to reject you? That's the risk, because everyone rejects you. Find a friend that isn't going to reject you, and then you can be wrong. You can stake claims, and then you can be nasty. You can be vicious. You can lash out, and you won't be rejected.
Money that they're getting and their desire to be useful, their altruistic sense inside of them. But it's not like an equality friendship-based relationship. I would also say for me personally as a therapist, it was like I had empathy for people who were suffering in ways that I felt my life easily could have turned out to be like. And so I wanted to help people take the reins of control back in their life. But it's very difficult, especially when people who have gone on for decades and decades and never figured out how to take the reins of their life, or I say to go back and learn how to take control of the reins of their life when they maybe never had it in the first place. It's like learning how to build.
So this is take control of the reins of their life. Like someone, I just want to sit with these phrases. In this one, I could spend a year taking back, there's people, the religious people, all the spiritual, don't take control of and it's like, no, you need to take control of the reins of your life. It's like, let go and let God. All this opposite what you need to do advice. Take back control of the reins of your life. So many lies from the cult of positivity and the religious and the just so many lies. Just take back control of your life. It's fine.
a skill set that was not something they were given as through modeling as a child. So I think, again, something that people really have to do if they're lonely is they have to start by figuring out how to meet some of their own needs. I guess the word I would use is take control of some sort of self-therapeutic process, some self-directed process where they have their.
So this is just, I'm at the edge of my seat. What's the solution? What's the answer? Take control of your own process. Take control of your therapeutic process. Take control of meeting your own needs. See, the reason I reject this my whole life is because I know we live in a community. We need others to help us with our needs. There's the interdependency. It's not this whole independent. So what he seems to be advocating for is independence and not interdependence. And I know that's false. But what I hadn't considered is that it's not the end game, it's a starting point. It's not the whole story. It's a part of the story. Is be independent as much as you can with the allowance for being dependent on others. It's not like a either or thing.
Their own primary agency in learning how to change their life and realizing, because what I've seen again and again is outside people often can't do it. Best therapist in the world can't save someone if the person.
So this is brilliant. He's not going to sugarcoat it. Outside people can't do it. And so this is where the despair and the hopeless, because it's like you need somebody to save you and rescue you. Now he's saying, but nobody can do it, right? That is despair 101 if you don't have a solution. Take control of your own therapeutic process, because outside people can't do it. It's just harshness. The harsh truth. It's brutal.
Not putting in a huge amount of effort themselves. It can help to have outside people. It can help to have a whole surrounding community that's loving and caring. But people, especially if they don't have that community around them, or maybe if they have only a very small version of that community, they have to take responsibility for it themselves. And a big part of what I've seen also is that if people do
take responsibility for yourself. And I'm going to probably go through this and do some journaling. I'm going to go through my video and I'm going to do some journaling. Take responsibility for yourself. Take responsibility for yourself. It's not a fair ask. It's like that's not reasonable for me to take responsibility for myself. I can't. I don't. That's not possible. It's not fair.
You have a very small number of people in their life who are giving, but they have huge loneliness needs, huge unmet emotional needs, unresolved needs from going all the way back in their life. Often what happens is people who are very desperate for connection, people who are very harmed and hurt and full of pain and loneliness in the way like that I once was, can really demand too much from any one or two individuals in their life. They can be too needy. And basically people can tap out.
Demand too much, become too needy, and then they tap out because they can't deal with it. It's too much for them. Demand too much, become too needy. And the problem is, but I am needy and I do need, and my demands are legitimate, right? I am an honest victim. I do need. I am needy. God built it like my life. God has seen my life. I am needy because of I'm not being loved. I'm needy because I'm not being loved the way I need to be loved. So somebody's got to love me. Somebody's got to step in and love me the way I need to be loved in order to be okay. And he's saying, no, bucko. He's saying, no, bucko. It's not fair. God created a world that isn't fair.
Out their friends. I saw that again and again in therapy, that many people didn't come to therapy until their last couple of friends finally threw up their hands and said, I can't be friends with you in a super intimate way anymore. You need too much from me. You're demanding too much. I'm exhausted. I can't help you anymore. I've tried for a long, long time, and I just got to take a break. I got to take a step back. And that time is when many people said, oh my God, I need to talk to somebody professionally, because in my personal life, just in the free way that people give and take in friendship, I don't really have anybody anymore. And so how do people start rebuilding the community?
It's like I've been using other people to feel my feelings for me. It's like I give them my abuse and say, you grieve my pain for me. Because I can't do it myself. And I told myself the story, it's I'm sharing grief. A grief shared is a grief halved. But it's like I'm giving them a ball and saying, you hold this pain and you do the heavy lifting for me.
I think some of it entails really taking a good hard look at ourselves, figuring out what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. How do we begin to give? And I think a lot of people, from what I've seen, and I remember this from my own personal life, is feeling sort of an anger, a resentment, like, wait a second, I didn't get enough in my life. I wasn't given enough in my life. I've had a really unfair
so, oh, wait a second. I haven't been, it's unfair shake. I haven't, why am I? This isn't fair. That's what I just did.
Shake of the dice in so many ways. And now you're telling me that I actually have to be more giving? That's not fair. Why should I be more giving? I haven't been given enough.
Right.
And in a way, as a child, it was true. I wasn't
Not
given
in a
enough,
way.
and I didn't have
It
the
actually
resources
is
to
true.
know how to give. But as an adult,
not in a way. It's not in a way. It is truth. So now he's making that, and people like, as an adult, you're just supposed to put away childish things. But so there's almost a contradict here. His whole shtick is childhood, but now as an adult, you're responsible, but childhood. You're responsible, but childhood, right? It's coming up from the one is taking the Band-Aid off. It's not fair. As an adult, it's like he's making the demand of accepting the unfairness.
what was my option? It's like people weren't going to just spontaneously give me anymore. They didn't owe me anything. When I became an adult, the world actually didn't owe me anything anymore. Adults didn't owe me anything anymore. I didn't.
And this is the horror. This is the horror that nobody owes me anything anymore. When I felt that people owed me because I needed to be loved. The horror, nobody owes me anything. That's horror, and that's where suicide and despair.
Have parents anymore who were responsible for me. So really the only person who could really give me when there was nobody else to give me was me. I had to become the parent of myself. And I think that fundamentally is true for everybody.
And I wonder how much I offload this to God. He's not that big and slow. I'm offloading, like, he's like the only one is me. And I'm like the only one is God. This is where we have a difference of opinion, perspective, whatever you want to say. he's advocating for a closed. This is the problem. He's still advocating for a closed system. This is like why a God's because God is an open. Like he's still really the only one is me, right? It's like a reductionist potentially. It's a reductionist, like not accounting for the socialization of humanity. And I noticed this in all his videos. He's not. It's like he I did, but he seems like he was never socialized as a child, and so he's sort of missing that part of what it is to be human.
That fundamentally, once we become adults, the primary person in our life who is responsible for taking care of us, who is responsible for being our parent, is us. We have to take the reins of our life and figure out how to fundamentally solve our problems. And anybody else who's going to try to help us, friend or therapist, is just ultimately a secondary figure. And I think a lot of people, especially I've seen people who are really lonely.
So this is reordering, because I was looking at them as primary figure and internal self-work is secondary, and he's flipping it. And so I really need to sit with that reordering of other people helping me is secondary, not primary.
Get into that desperate place where they feel like they themselves on the inside can't do it, and they want someone else to give them the answer. They want someone else to take the
right, which is a guy like I can't do it, so somebody else has to do it. An honest victim.
Those primary steps to love them and care about them and respect them and be there for them in the way that they can't. Most friends will not engage in that. Or if friends do try to do that, sometimes it's like they're the type of people who end up giving too much, and they can even be kind of self-harming in how much they give to other people. They want to give more than they're able, and they can tap themselves out and they can let themselves run dry emotionally. I think therapists can even do that, but it is the job of a therapist, I think, sometimes to jumpstart that process in people who haven't figured out how to give it to themselves. But ultimately, people have to figure out how to take responsibility for themselves. And they can use the modeling they learn in a relationship with a therapist or even as a friend to figure out how do I expand on this. And also,
so here he's getting a, like, I don't understand the term modeling. I don't know what that means. But it sounds like he's saying you can use other people to help you figure out how to take care of yourself. But modeling, I'm not clear what modeling means.
Everybody, from what I've seen, has something to give to someone else. Everybody has gifts. Everybody has the ability to love somehow. And if we look inside ourselves and say, where is our ability to give? It may not be that big, but there's always someone we can give to who needs something. There's so many needy people out in the world. And
so this is interesting. I've heard this before. It's like the mustard seed parable. Like, so I feel I have nothing to give because I'm too damaged. And he's basically saying, not. It's like calling bullshit. It's like, okay, so you're too damaged, but there's something. There's always something. There's always, right? And it resonates as true what he's saying. Like, if I have 99% not to give anybody else, I still have that 1%. There's always, so probably need to sit with this as well.
I don't mean giving money. I think sometimes people give money in ways that they want things back, but I think that doesn't really fundamentally work in healing that problem of loneliness. I think it means giving of our attention, giving of our ability to listen, and learning how to develop that skill. And again, it comes back to learning.
So, I mean, it's strategy for friends, giving attention and ability to listen. It sounds like this is the sacrifice you make to make friends, I guess, maybe.
How to give that to ourselves, to learn how to develop that loving, giving relationship with ourselves, and then expanding it, transferring it into our relationships with others. And what I've seen.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So he's almost modeling it is that if you learn how to love yourself, then you can transfer that to love. And it's been the opposite. Like I'm waiting for someone to love me like my mother should have, like my father should have to learn. And he's inverting it. And what's coming up to somebody told me, whatever, 20 years ago, you've got it back. And I didn't trust them. They said they were a quack, blah, blah, blah. You've got it backwards. And I'm like, that's all you got? You're just going to tell me I got it backwards? But that's coming up now is I got it backwards. But again, so I don't think I would have heard this from anyone else because they're not going to acknowledge the brokenness, the trauma. But because he's acknowledging the brokenness and the trauma, I'm hearing that the idea of taking like you, it's all he's not saying like let it, but he's like you have to find a way. Like he's just accept it's unfair, right? Accept it's unfair.
Is when people can do that, their loneliness can go down and they can get better at it and better at it. And the other thing is, like this karmic relationship of what we give, we receive, the more people learn really how to give of themselves, primarily give to themselves in their relationship with themselves, and then transfer it to others, the more the world starts giving back to them. Can't explain exactly why that is. And sometimes actually I can explain it though. I think giving people who give more, who are more giving to themselves, who are more self-loving, and by extension loving of others, have a
So I have given up on sacrificing myself for others. This is a part of my journey. Is he's talking about giving to others? I'm like, I'm not. I did that for the first 20. I'm not doing it. I am not going to sacrifice myself for others anymore. It's like, so I'm saying I'm selfish now.
certain radiance, give off a certain energy. Their faces are different, their expressions are different, their eyes look different. And I think people subliminally, other people, pick that up. Yes, there are people out there who will take advantage of people who give, but I also think there are people out there who are healthy people who are drawn to it, who are drawn to people who are just more giving souls. And they give to those people more, and then they get more in return. And as the result, both of them have their loneliness go down. So, what's the magic bullet? What's the magic answer? Fundamentally, I think the magic bullet, the magic answer is hope. That there is always hope for change. People can change.
I don't know, man. The magic bullet of hope. It's just it counter to my truth of my life experience. Maybe he's talking about a different hope. I think he's talking about the hope that you can change. It sound like platitudes.
Profoundly. I have seen people change profoundly. I've seen people who are very lonely become people who are not very lonely. And I've seen people who are very lonely become people who are not very lonely, who are actually able, because of their insight, their history, their knowledge, their empathy of loneliness, able to help other people break out of that cycle and help other people learn to help themselves, who in turn help other people. And I think as a primary case example, I'm one of those people. I think in many ways I was someone who was set up. If I hadn't learned how to fight for myself and figure a lot of this stuff out through all the resources at my disposal, I was someone who very easily could have been someone who was a profoundly lonely person. And I really just don't see myself someone who's like that anymore.
So there it is. And I'm probably going to end there and listen to this, and we'll see what happens. The plan is to do this daily, but I have to do it super secret private. Okay.